You're listening to another episode of the Coaster101 podcast. I'm Andrew Stillwell, and this week on the podcast, we're joined by a past guest, and it's rare that we get repeat guests, but we're very excited to have him. He is a creative leader in the themed entertainment space, whose credits include Nickelodeon Universe and American Dream. He worked on several attractions at Mall of America, and also the Thea Award-winning SpongeBob Subpants at Moody Gardens. He's also involved with the Big Break Foundation and TETV. Please welcome back to the podcast, Patrick Kling. Patrick, how's it going? Oh,
great. Living the dream. Thanks for having me back. I didn't realize you didn't have people back at all, or that's unique.
We're still relatively new. You know, we're 50 some episodes in right now, but we've had, I think Chris Foshi was with Worlds of Fun, and he was on like our second episode and then came back for a social media roundtable. So it's not unheard of that we have our return guests, but like I said, we're thrilled to have you back. And, you know, the reason we wanted to bring you on this week, or I wanted to bring you on this week, on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago, and this is the most like business niche thing, you know, on LinkedIn, I saw this that you posted and I wanted to talk about it. But, you know, you had this post and, you know, looking at it, it was basically how to start thinking like a theme park designer when visiting an attraction. And, you know, you come from a background of theme design, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But what's your background and kind of what inspired you to write this post?
Yeah, really, well, and more about the post, like it's got like around 6,000 views, which is pretty high for LinkedIn, especially for such a niche thing of theme park design. Mm-hmm. 150 likes, all that kind of good stuff. So I was just sitting there in the middle of the night and was like, I'm going to write something that's related to being creative design, because my LinkedIn content kind of varies from just posting jobs, helpful hints and tricks, to, you know, amplifying other voices. And I'm like, I'm just going to write, like, lists are always good. People like lists. And then I also thought people would add to it. And then we had several theme park designers also add to that list as well. So that I was just kind of sitting there at night, like, how can I contribute to the world and start getting that out there? I think, you know, to be even more honest, I'm on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter, Patrick S. Kling. That's my handle. And I see a lot of people posting on Twitter about like theme parks, and I see that they don't really understand. They come from a very guest perspective of like, well, why isn't this running? Or why isn't this operating like this? And why this and why that? And I can't respond. I can't get in the weeds with every single person on Twitter, but I'm like, there's got to be a way to just like showcase some of the things that are involved in this and start to help educate the public so that, they kind of see it from our perspective, the theme park designer perspective, if that makes sense. I don't think I answered your original question, which I'm happy to go into, which is my background.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I started actually working in theme parks and amusement parks when I was like 14. So I worked at a water park called Wild Rivers Water Park in Irvine, California. So very young, I started to work around guests. I loved how it brought families together. And, you know, I just noticed quickly that I was always trying to problem solve. And if I saw an inefficiency or a thing going weird here, I would talk to my managers, or I put like a presentation together to say, hey, you should really have like a season pass Sunday where you honor season pass holders, and actually started doing that. And other random things of like, hey, maybe we can have a band where people can charge to it. And that was like in the 90s. So, you know, things like really, I was coming up with these ideas and I just loved that. And then I worked at Disneyland. So while I was in college, I worked at Tomorrowland attractions, worked at Star Tours, worked at Buzz Lightyear, worked at Space Mountain. And then I was on the test and adjust crew for the Finding Nemo submarine voyage. So then I had 6 years of pretty hardcore operations. I was a what they call a lead over there, like a supervisor. And so I had all these things in my head, even before I went to go become a theme park designer, which is really important because, you know, when you're in the blue sky or concept development phase, oftentimes there's not somebody from operations in the room. And while it should not like stop your creative thought process, you can mitigate a lot of long-term issues if you're like, well, if you think in your head as one of your perspectives of how is this going to work for the guests and how do guests really interact with an experience? And so then I graduated and eventually landed in Orlando, worked for Nickelodeon Experience Design as a project coordinator, where I worked on several projects, land expansions, worked on that SpongeBob SubPants adventure, worked on an ice exhibit. And then I was taken over by SeaWorld to be a creative lead over there with Brian Morrow, working on a lot of random little projects and some blue sky stuff. And it was just like, he'd throw me like the word mermaids, go do some research. And I'd come back with like 20 ideas overnight. And it was really fun. And there are a few different attractions I worked on. Blue sky is there as well. And then I worked at iTech Entertainment and worked doing creative writing, more like an associate producer with their studio. It's a design firm here in Orlando. And then I got brought back to be the art director for that Nickelodeon Universe project in an American Dream, where there's over 25 attractions. And if you guys should all check it out. It's a great amusement park. And there's a great water park there too at DreamWorks. And then I was there for 3 years working on that, and then a water park as well. So it's kind of fun starting to work at a water park and then being able to work on a water park that was themed to Nickelodeon that's in Aquanet. That's my very brief rap sheet over the past, 20, I don't know how many years it is, 15. I don't know how old I am these days. It's probably 20 years.
Gotcha. You hit on some key points there. Like you've seen it. Obviously, you're a fan of the industry. We're talking to each other on Zoom right now. You've got your I Love Water Parks hat on, which talking to you in the past, that means we're dealing with fun Patrick right now. You get serious Patrick when there's no hat, and we get fun Patrick with the I Heart Water Parks hat on. But you've seen it as a fan. You've seen it from the operational perspective, and then you see it as from the creative side as well. So you've hit it on all parts. And when you look at an attraction and, as a guest or as something you're concepting, in your LinkedIn post, you said you've got to do a certain amount of things. Like the attraction itself starts before you even enter the ride, right?
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, that was kind of my number one thing. We can talk about that, which is to say, I'll just read it all, analyze every single element of the linear experience: entry, queue, that's where you wait, load, ride, unload. And then also, soon to come, pre-arrival and post at home. Post meaning like once you're gone. And, any attraction can have that. And I think that that's where the industry is going to go, or everybody's talking about it going, is what are you doing before you get to that attraction to affect that experience? There's been a lot of talk about, at least at Galaxy's Edge, about, hey, how you did at Smuggler's Run may affect how people talk to you later on. Did it quite happen? But it's that kind of immersive experience in like theatrical, immersive theater that I think places can go. But also this, how is your theme park experience before you even get into the theme park, meaning at home? So how many people posted their Magic Band opening, their box opening before they went to Disney World? That's great marketing. Great, great that they had that, because people said, oh my God, now you start your experience right there, already happening. How is the website? How is booking fast passes? At least when there was fast passes. How easy is it to work? If you have a pinch point in the system, it's going to start leaving a bad impression on the guests. If you take an hour for you to park and 45 minutes to buy a ticket booth at the front ticket booth, that's affecting a guest stay. And when I was in operations at Disneyland, they used to drill that in. Look, like we walk in and maybe it takes 15 minutes to get to our parking lot, to get to Star Tours, to be at our greeter position. And it may be 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. We're just starting our shift. And if a guest is just getting there now, they've paid for parking, which cost probably at that time $20. They probably waited 30 minutes to park. They waited to get on a parking lot shuttle. That took 15 minutes. If they didn't have a ticket, or this was probably before they had like online ticketing. Now they're in a ticket booth. They dropped for their family of four, $100. Maybe they had park uppers. They're at $1,000 and have been kind of in the process at Disneyland for 2 hours before they just got in line at Star Tours. And so they're already in some sort of a headspace where you have to treat, I'm not saying you just need to be delicate about that. You know what I mean? And that was kind of drilled into us of like, look, like everyone's kind of on their journey. People are paying a significant amount of money to be here. And we want to make sure that we give the best experience as possible. And look, there's limitations on how efficient people can be. And now a lot of things are like online or, like Walt Disney World. I mean, I haven't been to it. I've never seen a line at the ticket booth at Walt Disney World because, it's basically just people already have their tickets or park hopper tickets. But making things as streamlined as possible is going to affect that guest experience and affect their day and affect how they're going to perceive things. I just went on kind of like an operations tangent, but it all has to do with that themed experience, Right. If it took 3 hours to get into Disney Studios, that would not be a good time.
No.
You know what I mean? And I always think of Disney Studios right now in my head, but so yeah. And it's kind of interesting because we have examples of the at-home experience as well. Like Buzz Lightyear in 2005 or 6, they had like a little interactive where you could go at home and play online and maybe kind of interacting with the guests that were on the ride. Didn't really have a payoff and it kind of went away. But that kind of interaction, I think is good. And we know that like Halloween Horror Nights, they've done all these things where they do scavenger hunts. That's a really bad word for it. They do even more leading up to these big payoffs in the parks as well. So there's a lot of room for that. The problem is scale, how many guests can get there, how many people can participate, how much money does it cost, and what's the return on the investment when you start talking about those types of programs.
For sure. Yeah. And it's definitely, I think especially the resort parks, your Disney's, your Universals, even, SeaWorld and Busch Gardens to a bigger perspective than that. There's the overall guest experience. It starts, as you said, before you get your vacation, before you even leave your house for your vacation. But, getting into the parks and, seeing this and you mentioned that headspace. Like, what is something you think a park could do to not expedite, but to improve that kind of pre-arrival experience?
Yeah, no, that's I think it's like, let people know what they should expect as much as possible. I think is probably the best thing that you could do. And that's not a critique of anything that I know that is happening right now, but why not put wait times at your parking booths? Or if you're that backed up, you could say, hey, it's this while you wait, start doing this. Give things people to do while they wait in their cars. And not all parks have ridiculously long ticket booth lines. So that's most of the time they work pretty quick. But if you're going into it saying, hey, just so you know, it's when you enter, it's going to be about this until you get to the front gate. And then we all know that parks also have security. I think what Disney has done recently at Walt Disney World with their new security where you just walk through is amazing. They don't have lines anymore. I mean, every time I've been since, they don't have lines. People are just walking right through. And I think they've actually, there was an article from the Orlando Sentinel that they've found more items now because of how sophisticated that technology is. And I think it started in Six Flags actually. So
believe it or not, it started at Six Flags. It was kind of they emerged out of COVID and they were the first. And leave it to Six Flags of all the regional operator chains. I mean, nothing against anybody else, but leave it to Six Flags to figure that one out. That was before Disney, before Universal, before Busch, Cedar Fair, Hershey, and whoever. It was Six Flags who figured that out and had it first. It's crazy to me.
And I think that, it's something interesting is people also can feel when you're not operating at full capacity. So when you walk in to go do through security or a parking and it feels like you don't have the system going as smoothly as possible. And that affects the guest experience too, especially probably more savvy people who are a little more experienced with going to the parks. If it's like, all right, we're going to dwindle down, 5 theme parking lanes to 1. It's like, well, no, can you not park people? There's different ways of doing that to keep the line going. And in regards to security, if you have closed security lanes and you got to hire more security. And I know it's cost money and I know but it is affecting that guest experience. And you don't want people going in and feeling that at that moment in time. And then when I say that, I also know that they're also dealing with the fact that they're going to have a morning rush for 4 hours or so. And a 4-hour shift is not great for a person to have to work through. So you kind of have to figure that out and figure, okay, well, if you're going to have 4 hours of work here, maybe that other part of their shift, you can have 4 hours of working somewhere else, doing something else in the park. Because we all know that that's that's just a crunch time. It's a pinch point at that moment. So that's operations is not easy.
Right.
But if it's taking an hour to get in, that's a long time to not even getting in the park.
Absolutely. Well, you're in the park. We're through security now. We're through the parking. We're in the park, and there is the level of immersion, especially. I mean, it started with Disney. Walt Disney was notorious for that, and I've taken the Keys to the Kingdom tour where they talk about how the audio transitions, or there are trees acting as berms so you can't see out of a land, or visual cues. Like if you're in this one spot in Adventureland right near the entrance and you turn around to look at Cinderella Castle, there's a tree in your way that's like a castle-shaped tree, basically. As theme parks have, modernized, and it started, I feel like, obviously Disney had it first, but what Universal did with Harry Potter, the level of immersion that the Wizarding World had at Islands of Adventure and then Universal Studios Florida has kind of had a trickle-down effect to the regional parks. Based on what you've seen as far as, the regional chain parks, the independent parks, how do you feel the level of immersion has increased over the past several years?
Yeah, I think, this is the interesting thing. It's like being an immersive experience doesn't necessarily need to mean you have to break the bank. And the level of expectations at a guest at a Six Flags, Cedar Fair park, or a regional park are a lot different than at Universal and Disney. Mm-hmm. I think we have several examples of, like Sally Dark Rides has produced a lot of great interactive attractions for the Cedar Fair park, or I'm sorry, for the Six Flags parks that are, kind of like Spider-Man-esque. Mm-hmm. For DC Comics, it's Justice League. When they open up, it's pretty spectacular. That type of experience that you have with and at that regional park level where they can have that. Also, Hershey Park has a lot of great experiences that they've done. Mm-hmm. And you kind of randomly will see these fun little experiences on the parks as well. But it's always about, like, people say, well, I wish, we could get this, big immersive attraction at, our regional park here or wherever. Right. Mm-hmm. And then you have to look at, well, who's going to that park and why are they going to that park? And it may not make sense to do that. It made me like, no, this park specifically is more geared towards adults and teenagers, or that tween market that really just wants to go upside down. And that's okay. That's fine. Yeah. And so there's nothing wrong with that. And so then you're really looking at, like, providing a safe environment for them. And that interactive ride does fit in with that quite nicely, Mm-hmm. And then we look at other places, like Holiday World, which is just really fun. And they have some fun little rides there as well, like the turkey, whatever it's called, the turkey trot or turkey.
Gobbler Getaway.
Gobbler Getaway. Okay. And that's really fun. And, there are these experiences that go on that level of fun, like, or like Mr. Toad's Wild Ride or whatever. But it's just, you have to figure out, like, well, who's going to go and why, and does it make sense to do it there? And I just rambled on there, but I think it's about knowing that, and knowing that there is possibilities to do that. I think that the level of immersion that you see in regional parks in Europe is extraordinary. Like it's on the Knott's Berry. I think Knott's Berry Farm is a good benchmark of how themed out and immersive an amusement park, / theme park can really be for a regional park.
Yes.
And out there, they kind of go over the top with it. Those audiences now they kind of expect it. They have those rides, which is really fun. Like they have dark rides, they have water rides, they have all that. Mm-hmm. While, the Six Flags and Cedar Fair parks mostly have, they will get a return on their investment if they build the biggest and baddest roller coaster. They know it,
right. But even in that same regard, I mean, over the past couple of years, Cedar Fair has kind of leaned into the theming of their new roller coasters. I think Mystic Timbers at Kings Island is a really good example with the Shed, and the Miami River Lumber Company, Copperhead Strike at my home park of Carowinds, kind of the same thing. It's creating rides with backstories, and I'm now thinking Twisted Timbers is another one. They're all these rides. They've got their own kind of the extended Cedar Fair universe. And we talked to Weber Group on last week's podcast about the Snake River expedition up at Cedar Point. And, for Cedar Point, which is this park that's focused on roller coasters for so many years, to have their own kind of Jungle Cruise meets great movie ride immersive experience in the park that's, involves the Forbidden Frontier, and you can see Millennium Forest from all the angles, but it's a full-blown 20-minute experience that it has live actors and animatronics and all this other stuff. I think the regional parks, I mean, again, like you said, it doesn't need to break the bank, but I think the regional destinations are catching up a little bit to Disney. It's all that trickle down effect. Which, as a themed entertainment creative, and I want to touch a little bit, because you were talking about becoming immersed in something, and Nickelodeon Universe and American Dream, really good example of this. They've got all the classic properties that kind of appeal to the nostalgia, your Legends of the Hidden Temple, your Invader Zim, the late 20s, early 30 somethings they remember, they have a fondness for, but they've also got the more modern properties. So when you're creating an environment like that, how difficult is it to appeal to such a wide range of guests?
Yeah, with that balance, when you're doing 25 attractions, and there is a huge balance that goes into what are considered like 90s or nostalgia. They don't like to use the word nostalgia because Nickelodeon's always new, but the old classic properties.
Yes.
Then the tried and true like SpongeBob, Dora, and TMNT, and Paw Patrol, and then the newest attractions or newest shows. Like there's the network will be pushing this brand new show and say, we need to have this. And we know that theme parks may have an attraction may have a 2-3 year timeline, depending on how elaborate it is. And in that park, we knew we could not do everything. Whatever's on air right now, we could not do everything that's on air, because we don't know if the show is going to have a second, third season. We want to see like at least like 3-4 seasons to know that it's a viable property, or it's popular enough to warrant its own attraction. So, but then there's also the fact that if something this is just funny or cool, like Legends of the Hidden Temple is always going to be fun to just walk up across, and you're going to get it. You're going to see that, okay, it's a giant Olmec statue. It's lighting up. It's huge. And there's some fun interactives on that experience. So either, it's kind of like even though you may not know that IP, the kid may not know it, it's still going to be fun. Similarly, Rugrats, we have some Rugrats sculptures out there, and now Rugrats is coming back. So that's another thing. Like these things kind of come around, and we know that Rugrats is a pretty core property from the nostalgia brand. Mm-hmm. So you just kind of have to do a mix, and you tell the executives, hey, we can't do every single attraction. We have to go into the bench here. And even though it may not be what they want, the marketing people want, you have to explain to them very delicately, no, we need to cover all of our bases. And we know that our fans like Blue, and Blue came back, right? So we kind of got lucky with things that came back, Blue's Clues and You and all that. And then also tried and true properties. And then sometimes we'll analyze which is just going to be fun. Like what would be a good environment to try to create, a fun theme around. Jimmy Neutron's fun. You're going to have gadgets and gizmos, and he hasn't been on air, but he was very popular, a decade ago or so. And it just looks fun. You go up there, there's a bunch of gadgets and gizmos, and it looks cool, kind of like the rule of cool.
Yes.
So there's definitely, it's kind of like a secret formula to try to make it balanced out, where it can't all be nostalgia. It can't be stuff that's just been on the air for 6 weeks. And it has to be things that are more tried and true as well.
Got it. I want to go into kind of your approaching these attractions as, looking at it from the eyes of a creative, a designer like yourself. Yeah. And Rise of the Resistance, I feel like, is a good example. Like, you start before you even enter the park, 7 a.m., if you're lucky enough to get there. Boarding groups, that's another topic for another day. But, from entering the Batuu to being fully immersed in that environment, to the queue, to the multiple pre-show experiences, to the ride itself. I mean, are there other attractions you can think of that kind of check all of the boxes, talking about that completely linear experience? Other attractions you can think of that kind of also accomplish that in a, very successful way?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably countless. I think that Rise of the Resistance is kind of its own thing. then I don't know if we're going to see kind of again. But I think that in regards to storytelling, I think Indiana Jones Adventure Disneyland is spectacular with that.
Mhm.
I think that Forbidden Journey is spectacular as well. And that's Wizarding World of Harry Potter. Just when you have that lead into it, I'll start on, we were kind of going about how great Rise of the Resistance is. I'll focus on Harry Potter a little bit.
Okay.
Just entering the land and for people that were waiting and clamoring to go visit these worlds, you go down Hogsmeade Street. So now you set this environment that very familiar to them. And then you see the castle. It's a great reveal. It's kind of the weenie of the land. Then to go and to explore the castle and see all the different special effects and the wind, the pictures that are coming to life, all that integration. And then to go out and fly around with Harry Potter is really quite a spectacular experience, and remarkable. And what's also remarkable is how efficient that attraction is. They're dispatching every 7 seconds. That's not an easy task to do. And it's not an easy task to have be doing show scenes where every 7 seconds they're resetting. And there's so much integration there. And we all know that they have the giant domes that are spinning around and kind of following along with you so you can have the media. So the first time I went on that, I was pretty disoriented. Like I did not know what was happening around me. I wasn't sure if we were like in a huge room, if we were in a small room when it came to the dome. And then the second time I kind of looked around and was like, oh, this is even cooler. So when you're able to kind of blow everyone's mind, take you to a place that you want to go, that's familiar, that they've always wanted to go to and explore it. That's really fantastic. And Indiana Jones Adventure is another great example of that, right? Like just to lead up in Adventureland, then you're exploring the temple. Then you go into the, there's also, and that's also, it was kind of by necessity that they had to create such a long corridor. But there's a lot of storytelling every which way as you're going through, and a lot of interactive experiences. They're pretty subtle there, but they're fun. The pulling of the bamboo stick that's holding up the, like the spikes. All that anticipation leading into the ride where you're thrust into familiar moments, but also your own moments. And then the finale moment, the reveal of that attraction when you get into the temple room. I don't think there's a better reveal on any on-ride attraction anywhere, for how impressive it is. And then to leave you with that boulder coming at you. I laugh every single time. It gets me every single time. Like that, those kind of moments where you're so disoriented or just left with that thrill. It's one thing to thrill people by going on a loop. It's another to thrill people by making them feel like they're going to be crushed or just they don't know what's going on. Like it's really quite exhilarating. I don't think you can walk off that ride without being pretty just all the adrenaline's going through you.
Absolutely.
Forbidden Journey.
It makes a ton of sense. I'm thinking also Hagrid's Magical Creatures Motorbike Adventure. They've got a really, really good storyline through the queue and all that. Even something like Reign of Kong at Universal Orlando. I mean, you think of the queue as kind of an attraction of itself. And I want to touch on another one of the points you made in your LinkedIn post. And you said, look 360 at every single element, but also take a look at everything around you. If it's taking you into a story or out of a story, what is something, and I'm using an example here. I was at Camden Park last week, and not to say their haunted house, their classic pretzel manufacturing dark ride is, a work of modern technology, a modern marvel, if you will. But, I'm riding in this ride and then I see the exit sign inside the attraction as I'm riding it. I'm like, okay, well, you've taken me out of this. But what is something that, you think of that could take you further into a story or take you out of the story? That's kind of something that a designer might just not even think of.
Yeah, I mean, it really separates the kind of the one experience from another is how well things are integrated, into this, how lighting is integrated into this, how projectors are. If I see a projector on a ride, I immediately am looking at it and being like, well, why is there a projector there? Or like, what is this going there? And I know it's a necessity to have it, but there are a million ways to hide a projector. You will not see a single projector on Rise of the Resistance. You won't. There's no way you're going to see any of that stuff. If you go on another experience, the ceilings may be really tall, and then they start hiding things in the ceiling. And you're naturally not going to look up at a ceiling, but if it's a lower ceiling, I've been on a ride that had just a projector probably 2 feet above my head, and I'm like, why would that be? That's not. And I know why. It's money, it's this and it's that. But that pulls me out of the experience. I totally get your exit sign stuff. It's I have buddies that are like always trying to get their exit signs turned off. It's just they're battling people with that. Like, what's the safest thing? Can you have them on triggers? What? No, they need to. And sometimes it changes and all that. I think especially on media attractions, how well that media is integrated into the scenery around you. I think, we don't know that Spider-Man is a really great example of that. I think Rise of the Resistance is incredible, where I don't know, it's hard to tell when it's a screen and when it's an animatronic or what you're even looking at. It's which is really remarkable. But it works because they're able to frame your point of view. I think Transformers does that really well. And I think Spider-Man does that. That's what they're not necessarily seeing, is like, sometimes they'll have just like something in front of you and you don't realize why above your head, and it's blocking all that equipment they have. That needs to be a part, or it should be a part of that experience. Look, you're never going to be able to solve when people want to look completely behind them. We get that depending on what the attraction is, that's just the reality. And sometimes it adds to the fun. But Rise of the Resistance, they designed it 360. So you can really look anywhere you want, because we know at some point you are going to be looking basically anywhere on that attraction.
Right.
It's like funny, like Roger Rabbit cartoon spin's also fun because they do that as well, because you're spinning around the entire time. So that pulls me out. I think things, I'm trying to be nice about it. Like, a dirty queue, that'll mess me up. If I'm thinking, hey, I need to throw something away and there's no trash can, that can get me out of the experience. Like, I just want to be able to do that. And also a very slow moving queue will take you out of the experience as well. Then you're just thinking of like, oh my gosh, I've been here and waited and I've been in this room for so long. I think that I wish that like switchbacks would just die off soon. I know they can't, but if your attraction is very slow moving, that can be a real challenge. More things that are on ride, that'll take me out. They're getting better. They can get better about exit signs. I hear you, but especially where you are in the world, where they'll do that. But no, I think that covers it. I mean, it's all about the integration of the things that you have to get your experience, versus like what's going to support that animatronic. And I see it. I look and there's a little bar there. And if I'm able to see it, I'm looking for it. And I don't think 99.99% of the guests will see, but I'll see what's holding up, a little goblin. I'm just using something generic, and I'll see what was that and what was the mechanism and how does that work? And so, yeah, that's another thing.
Okay. I hear you. What are your thoughts on attractions like Jimmy Fallon and I think Dumbo at Walt Disney World that kind of, you said you want to get rid of switchbacks. I'm with you. Switchbacks are kind of the devil when it comes to waiting in lines, but things like that kind of give you something to look at, something to do while you're waiting for the attraction.
Yeah, that was kind of like all the rage for a moment. And I think that Dumbo was kind of twofold, right? They had a whole playground in there. And then they doubled their capacity, and that park already has 2 other spinning attractions. And so I don't even think they have that long of a queue anymore. Like, it was kind of an interesting thing where like kind of double solved their problem, where like now it's like it used to be a long line. Now it's not too much. I think the way that Jimmy Fallon handled it was great. I think giving people something to do, you have a little waiting card, is really a great execution. Like, I think that the queue is really a part of the experience. And the shows they do, the clips they do, even if you're not a Jimmy Fallon fan, it's still fun to just watch that. I think the limitations that we are bumping up against on that are, space, obviously, and how you train your guests to expect what and where. You know, if you go, I think we're probably going to see virtual queues become more of a thing at the Disneys and Universals, and not in that way. More go ahead and explore other areas of the park while you wait. But I think it needs to be it'll be more like okay, we're going to try to keep our line at 45 minutes or 30 to 45 minutes, which is what Rise of the Resistance tries to do. And then limit how many people are entering into that. But it's a big cost. It's a big ad to do that. And I think that Disney had a bit of a push to do it, and they kind of gave up on it a little bit. All that Scene One interactive stuff, that was going to be all part of Magic. The plans they had for that My Magic Experience stuff was way more elaborate than what they actually did eventually. And somewhere along the line, they said this isn't worth our return on investment, or priorities changed. And I think there are other ways to entertain your guests, or other ways to handle your queue that don't necessitate you to have to put people in a play area or a holding area. But I really applaud them for both parks for really experimenting, both with Universal and their virtual queue for Jimmy and Hagrid's, and Disney for their Scene Ones, where the little play area they had for Dumbo, and the way that they've attempted to do boarding groups. It's kind of like a no-win situation when you have a ride that everybody wants to go on and is not, taking 2,500 people an hour in yet.
Right. Needs to. But again, another conversation, another day. I want to talk a little bit kind of about eliciting emotion. And as a creator, it's important. I mean, even as basic as, me writing something for Coaster101, I want to be able to elicit emotion from a reader, but, on a much larger scale as an attraction designer and someone who creates these, greater environments as a whole. What is your goal? I mean, how do you plan to elicit emotion from somebody? How is that process, and what does that entail?
Yeah, it's actually funny you should ask. Somebody wanted a quote for a lesson, and I kind of talked about emotion, that you should figure out what you want your guests to feel emotionally, and then kind of work from there. And everything should support that. And I think we have a lot of examples of that. And I think it can work for any attraction. We could pick an attraction out of thin air. I'll just pick up Rock and Roller Coaster, for example. There it's really, it's thrill and excitement, anticipation, feeling like a VIP. And every step of the way leading up to the room, okay, you're part of us, you're part of the cool kids. Now you feel like you're exclusive. Maybe these aren't emotions, but you're feeling these feelings. And then you go out of the gate, and then you see a vehicle launch. And I don't think there's any other way to build up the emotion of that experience than seeing somebody go 0 to 65 and, whatever it was back then, 5 seconds. That is really building anticipation for this moment where you're going to be experienced the thrillingest roller coaster that Disney's really done. And then you feel that. That's the great, and that's the thing, is roller coasters will evoke feeling as well. Other examples out there. Yeah, I'm trying to think of maybe a more complex story out there. Like Indiana Jones, you're really on an adventure. You're exploring. It's another thing of anticipation, and like danger. You're feeling danger. You're feeling threatened, but you're also conquering it slowly but surely. That entire attraction is about feeling like you're on the edge. And so all the elements in the queue of building that suspense of, that you're in a foreign place, and there's danger lurks around every corner. Every single part of that ride is like, oh my gosh, don't come in here. Don't look over here. Right. It's kind of interesting. And then when you're on it, it's just things coming at you nonstop. You shouldn't be here. Turn around. You are now you're feeling fear, but then you conquer it at the end. It's a triumphant story, that you've been there. And then there's stories that are laughter, that you want to feel fun. You want to feel lighthearted. It's like when we look at the things that we did at Nickelodeon Universe at American Dream, we're always trying to put humor in there. And there's tons of that throughout the park. We want to bring that emotion of it's comforting nostalgia when you go and you see Ren and Stimpy and you see a log, and you're just you're brought back these childhood memories. And then you look up, there's a log poster, and then it's just all these things that are coming to you. That bring you warm and fuzzy feelings about how, that show. when you're watching a show, a TV, and you've watched 100 episode, you're having a bond to those characters, which is really, really interesting. And so we try to facilitate that emotional bond with all the warm and fuzzies at Nickelodeon.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm thinking, you're bringing up the kind of the Indiana Jones. I was thinking like E.T. when you've got Spielberg and it's like, hey, you have to help E.T. save the Green Planet. Or, even going back to Twister at Universal. It's like, hi, I'm Bill Paxton. Run for your life. And it's like, it Q and Twister. I'm thinking, I just, again, hit with this. Just memories just rushing in when you're talking about this. The Q and Twister with the spinning tire and the TVs with the snow out or the cable goes out. It's all about building that emotion. And I love that. I mean, it's fantastic.
Scenery is a great way to do that. Yeah, Twister's a great example of that. Like, look, you transition out of the sound stage and then you get into it's raining, the wind's blowing, the music's going. Mm-hmm. Music huge role, plays a huge role in that as well, of like building that suspense, lighting, a dark, right? Twister was a very dark cue. E.T. is they're trying to escape, so it's dark. It's also from the movie, right? When they're trying to escape the night, but night's also where there's things lurking in the night. Mm-hmm. And it's a dark ride, so it's going to be dark.
Of course.
Yeah.
I want to touch a little bit, you mentioned a lot of the creative theme park and other creative people commented on this. And I want to touch on a comment from Kevin McBee. And he says to ride or experience something 3 times. Once for enjoyment, second for experiential analysis, and then finally dive into the technical assessment with your head on a swivel. What is your personal opinion on, the ride 3 times method to make sure that everything is going the way you want it to go?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I will avoid every spoiler I can. I do not watch things on YouTube ahead of time. I just don't think that theme park rides were meant to be experienced with that. Just like on a YouTube video, they are showing us exactly where they wanted to look, but on a theme park experience, I should be able to look wherever I want and see everything around me.
Preach.
So that's all. Sorry, go ahead.
I said preach.
Yeah. So and now look, if I've been on a ride, I'll go through it. Maybe I'll watch it on YouTube for whatever reason I have, sometimes for research. But that's the first thing I don't like to do. I like to go in completely cold to experiences. I try to avoid photos and all that. I rode a new ride this past weekend. I went on Velocicoaster. And I went on twice. And it's a little bit of a different experience because it's so fast that there's not much to process. I'm like, okay, that's a cool thing. That's a cool thing. That's a cool thing. But I was very, and when you're in a queue and it's going it's not slow, but it's a queue. You kind of are doing it all in real time. Like I can't just sit in a room and say, oh, look at this or look at that and not think about it. It's kind of all happening at the same time. So let me do a different example, like Hagrid's, because that's a little bit more themed out, at least on the on-ride experience. There is themed to Velocicoaster, but that's a little bit of a special thing. Hagrid's for sure. I took in the wonder of it. I went on it and wasn't trying to look at all the attachment points, all that. I think Forbidden Journey is a great example of that. I kept my head back for the first time. Second time, I started to do a little more analyzing, like I said. And then I think it's actually part of the experience. It's kind of weird is seeing the machines doing what they're doing. But I think the point of that is like just not taking yourself out of the experience and not looking for flaws on the first time that you're going on. If a flaw is evident, like you said, it's one of those projectors in front of your faces, I'm going to notice it, even if I don't want to notice it. But I can pick out flaws on any attraction. I can pick out good things on any attraction, even an attraction that you hate or I hate. Well, I don't hate attractions, but I can point out something good about it or where they were successful with it in some regards, whether it's story, whether it's that. So when I went on Velocicoaster, I was very in tune with what the story was and trying to, I love the fact that, and, I know you probably saw my tweets about it, but I love that the story was very straightforward. It was irreverent. It was fun. So I was kind of honing in on that. And they have various story elements in the queue that are doing that operationally. We've heard the infamous lockers or the famous lockers now. Amazing. That they finally did that, that somebody finally said, let's have lockers on both sides. It's like, okay, cool. There he did it. And, I took in, I went in the afternoon, then I went at night. And it's different at night. They adjust the pre-show video. If it's dark out, it's dark in the pre-show video. Like those kind of things I just pick up on. I'm like, well, that was good. That's solid. Similar to the Rise of Resistance, that's the same thing they do for the when you're in the transport or you're transporting out in space. And then it's I think it's really about trying to experience things cold and not be looking for flaws. Second time, like you said, experiential analysis. That's when he's thinking about story. How is this as a story? And then starting to dive in on the technical analysis with your head on a swivel. That means like looking around everywhere. I agree with that as well. I think Rise of the Resistance is a pretty good example of that for me. Like I was just taking it all in. Rise is a pretty overwhelming experience to go through. And second time, okay, like figuring that out. How is the story beats, how that. Third time, really looking at this, taking in on the details. So we talked about very specific things that are taking people out of stories. What is so successful about Rise of the Resistance, and other people have done this too, is just the integration of it. So I think the best example is the lighting in the prison chamber, right? Mm-hmm. Where as the characters are moving across, and that's all projection media, the lighting is changing in the room because that's the shadow they're casting. And that kind of thing completely starts to sell that's a real person up there, or that's whatever. And in your head, you may not even think about that, but I'm picking up on that. And guests are subtly picking up on that, and it's bringing them even further in. If it's just something you're kind of walking across, or it's a media, and maybe not think twice about it, but it starts to feel flat. When you add those effects, it starts to bring it way more into your world. That was a really, really cool detail that they did. That really, I mean, I don't really recall ever seeing that kind of thing out there, where like that really that lighting detail was phenomenal. And to think about it, somebody said, all right, we're gonna have a projected media and we're gonna have them walking back and forth. And somebody in the room said, well, we got to adjust the lighting then. Like that's not cheap. That's kind of crazy. That's awesome that they did it. They didn't have to, but it pulls people into that. And that's something that I'm analyzing on those third, fourth, fifth times on the attraction. And then trying to figure out how that effect worked, trying to figure out the timing, trying to figure out if I'm going to go to this room or that room, or who's going where, when, all that kind of good stuff.
Got it. Yeah, I've ridden it once. I fortunately got on my last trip to Orlando, which was, February 2020. And I was so immersed in everything that was going on. I got off that ride where my jaw was just like, what the hell did I just watch or experience? And it was great. I've got one last question for you, and then we're going to wrap up this episode.
Sure.
Going forward, what is something you see that, hasn't really been done from a theme park perspective that you've always kind of had in the back of your head that's like, hey, it would be really cool if blank, that, you haven't really seen before? What is something you'd like to see in an attraction that you don't think has been accomplished yet?
So I'll say a part of a theme park, and I'll make it a little broader. I'd love to see being able to stay inside of a theme park in a hotel that's actually integrated into it. And so let's imagine that you're at the Islands of Adventure, and within the park, you can stay at the Toon Lagoon hotel. You can stay at the Dr. Seuss hotel. You can stay at the Hogwarts hotel. You can, or whatever, cottage. You can stay at the Jurassic World hotel. Mm-hmm. And it creates a lot of logistic issues. We know that people have kind of dabbled in it here and there. But I'd love to see that, even if they're like crazy bungalows, it's crazy expensive, but just being able to really stay in there. And, we have a couple examples here and there. And we know that the Star Cruiser is coming out, but even then you're not really in it. But that would be pretty phenomenal to see how that's happening. I'd love to see, now going back to an attraction level, I'd love to be on an experience where, and I was a part of a little mentor group session, and we developed an attraction that does this, where while you played on your phone throughout the day, and while you were in the virtual queue, and the things that you did on your phone affected your ride experience. So you were training a creature, and the more you trained, the stronger they were to compete in the Olympics. And then you went on the ride, and as you were on the ride, you saw your character compete. And then based on that, your whole ride would change. I love to see that kind of level of interactivity where you really feel like it's yours, or you had an effect on it, versus point and shoot guns at things. So I'd love to see that kind of interactivity. And yeah, I'll leave it at that.
I hear you, Patrick. Anything else you want to plug other than your Twitter, your LinkedIn, the greater Klingiverse right now? I mean, I joke about the Klingiverse, but the fact that you've spoken to my cousin Abby, who is she's at the Franklin Museum in Philadelphia. You've spoken to her more recently than I have, just because you're the most connected person in the industry that I know. But sure. Anything else you want to promote?
Well, I think I'd love to promote just the appreciation to anybody that's listening, that's going to a theme park, that's coming back, that's willing to go and spend money. It's been a devastating blow. I believe you me. This entire year has been terrible for theme parks, for entertainment spaces, for Broadway, for live experiences. And, I would just really hope that, put your cynicism aside about operations that are currently having troubles because of hiring and things like that, and spend as much money as you can. Please come in, have great experiences, spring for the fast pass or whatever it is. If it's not, although yesterday it was like $280. I'm like, I'm not doing that, but go and enjoy a meal, be kind at the parks. Because everyone's been through a lot this year, and we appreciate everyone coming and supporting the industry. And, it's going to take everybody coming back in full force to just get through it. Promotional wise, yeah, follow me on Twitter if you'd like. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll accept it as long as if you drop a note saying, hey, I heard you on Coaster101. You can find me, Patrick Kling, on LinkedIn. Twitter, Patrick S. Kling. I presume you'll put it in the comments. I'm pretty active on Twitter, and usually positive on Twitter. Themed Experience TV, Big Break Foundation. We had episodes about that. Those are also good places too.
Absolutely. Well, Patrick, thanks so much for educating the masses on, what it's like to think like a theme park creative. That's going to do it for this week's episode of the Coaster 101 podcast. As always, check us out, coaster101.com. We've got articles posted daily or every other day, depending on how we feel like it. We're also on social media, anywhere you can consume it. We're at Coaster101, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I think we've even got a LinkedIn page now. So if you want to follow Coaster101 on LinkedIn, I think we have it just so we can have a logo next to our positions there. But make sure you're liking, rating, reviewing, subscribing, telling your friends, going in YouTube comments and telling people how great our podcast is. It really helps people find the show. We love that because our audience grows. It makes it more fun to record, and we get great guests like Patrick who want to come back and talk about their craft and their careers and their thoughts. Thanks, as always, to JM Music Design for our theme music, and we will talk to y'all again next week. See ya.